What is Python? Python is a general purpose programming language. So what is a general purpose programming language? There are some languages which are domain specific. Let's say for example SQL or structured query language. SQL is used only to query the databases. Or JavaScript, which is used only in the client-side scripting in the browsers. But Python is not domain specific, which means we can do scripting, web application development, game development, API development, data analysis, visualization, machine learning, deep learning, and much more. Thus we call Python as general purpose programming language. It is an object-oriented programming language. Object-oriented is a programming paradigm. There are certain principles which a programming language has to follow in order to call it as an object-oriented programming language. And they are abstraction, encapsulation, inheritance, and polymorphism. We will explore in depth what these concepts are and how Python follows these rules in the upcoming tutorial videos. Python is dynamically typed. Other languages like Java or C# are statically typed, which means that in order to declare a variable, it is also mandatory to mention its type. Python is dynamically typed, which means that it is not mandatory to mention the variable type. You can just write the name of the variable and assign a value to it directly. The type of the variable will be decided in the runtime. Python is an interpreted language. Basically there are two types, compiled and interpreted. For example, Java is a compiled language, which means that the code will be compiled to a machine-readable format using a compiler, and then the compiled format will be used for execution. In Python there is no concept of compiler. It can be directly run and the code gets translated in the runtime using something called as interpreter. It's also considered as one of the easiest programming languages to learn. Many universities are now replacing C language to Python as part of their syllabus. Python runs on all major operating systems such as Windows, Mac OS, and Linux. Python is highly readable because it uses white space indentations to delimit the code blocks rather than using curly braces. Let me try to show what I mean to say. The left side is a Python code and the right side is a C# or Java code. Both code produce same output, but we can see that Python does same job with minimum number of lines. In Python, it is mandatory to use white space indentations to delimit the code blocks. Just by looking at the Python code, we can say that there are two for loops and the second for loop is inside of the first for loop. The same thing in C#, it takes some time to understand that the second for loop is inside the first for loop because C# uses curly braces to delimit the code blocks. Some of the big companies like Google, Yahoo, NASA, Red Hat, IBM, and many more use Python. So what can you do with Python? Python has a lot of modules or packages with which we can do almost anything. For example, web development using frameworks such as Django and Flask, game development using Pygame, data analysis using Pandas, Matplotlib, NumPy, machine learning using scikit-learn, natural language processing using NLTK, image processing using OpenCV, deep learning using TensorFlow, Keras, and CNTK, and the list is endless. Thank you and see you again in the next video.